In this short Q&A session, we will be moving on to the second type of session that you can conduct with your guest speakers, which is a classic presentation. Susan, can you tell us about how you can choose the topic for the presentation?
Eva, this is the one that I see most people defaulting to. They'll say, I'll get something that I've done before and I'll present on it, because sometimes they feel it'll make it easier and sometimes they have something really engaging to talk about. So my first question when it comes to something like this is, if you didn't have that presentation ready, would you be giving it to the audience? If the answer is yes, brilliant, go for it. If not, maybe have a think about it. What I would say here is, when it comes to thinking about what might be relevant and engaging, is think about your audience. Basically, is who are they? So if it is a group of startup founders, if it is a group of people who are returning to the workforce, is it people who are moving up in their career in the corporate world? Is it people who are very confused about where they want to go in life? Is it a group of people who are interested in philosophy? First of all, ask, who is my audience? And then from there, that really can help understand what they can get out of it. And the second thing is, ask that question directly. If you were in the audience, people always think in their heads, what's in this for me? And what is in it for them? Are there practical takeaways that they can implement? Are there insights that they're not going to get somewhere else? Are they something that they can work into their own workflow? Is it? So just think about that. And if the answer comes back to, yeah, but it's really interesting what I do, take the word I out of it. It needs to be what's in it for them. And then the third thing that I would say is, people do love visuals. There's no doubt about that. They really do. PowerPoint is there for a reason, or whatever technology that you might be using. But it also needs to be something that is not a crutch necessarily for you. It is something that should aid what it is that you're talking about. So one of the things that people never like in a presentation, Eva, is when they'll put up a slide and then say, oh, I'm just going to skip through that, or, well, you don't really need to see this, or, well, the font in this is really small now, but I'll tell you the overall detail anyway. Is, again, what's in it for them. Think about the user's experience. If you were in the audience, what exactly would you want to hear? Think like that, and that will really set you right.
Yes, I definitely agree that the guest speaker needs to think from the perspective of the audience. And what interactive elements do you think that the guest speaker can add for engagement in their presentation?
Oh, Eva, there's so many of these and they're so little used. The obvious one that you're going to expect me to say is, of course, Q&A, is asking people for questions at the end, right? That's the obvious one. Most people do that. It can be really good. What I like to do is, I like to put the audience in the passenger seat with me. And let me explain what that means. When it comes to, let's say I'm going to present on three things. I'm going to talk about inflation, I'm going to talk about the job market at the moment, and I'm going to talk about AI, right? So I know I'm going to talk about those three things. Using a tool like maybe Mentimeter, that's the one that we use quite a lot, or Slido, or any of these types of polling tools. By asking the audience, which rank these three topics in the order of importance to you. Then that's what I mean by putting them in the passenger seat beside me. If they say AI first, the job market second, and then inflation third, well then I'm still going to talk about the same things as I had planned, but just in the order of the audience's preferences, and it gives the audience more of an interaction to do that. Also, what I find is using a tool like that, asking people's interaction, like, let's say I'm going to delve into AI, is running some sort of a word cloud saying, what does AI mean to you? Or asking people a quiz, like a did you know, on how long it took ChatGPT to get to 20 million users, or things like that. By dropping those things in and by asking people to engage in those interactions can be very helpful. And then one other thing that I want to mention about the Q&A, right? A lot of people put Q&A to the end and they will ask or invite questions when it's finished, and they'll ask people to put up their hands. Even that isn't always easy for an introvert. It isn't always easy for somebody who may not have a lot of confidence, and a range of other people as well. Now, I love it, but as you can tell, I'm an extrovert and happy to put my hand up. So what I would also say is, using a tool, again, like Mentimeter or like Slido, using a tool like that where you can collect questions throughout the conversation using a link or a QR code. By doing that and allowing people to upvote on those questions, then that means that you can really get to what people really want to hear about, as opposed to one person who's got the confidence to ask what they would like to know. So there are ways in which you can build interactions into a presentation, which sometimes can be quite one-dimensional or quite one-way traffic. Loads of ways to make that a two-way thing.
Hmm. I definitely agree that Mentimeter would be great. And another app, which is also great for a quiz, is called Kahoot.
Mhm.
It's basically where students or any participants, they can choose multiple choice, and it's quite fun, and they can also play it in groups. So I think that could be quite interactive as well.
Great point.
And then for our last question, so after the presentation is over and there's still time left, what can the guest speaker do then?
Okay, this sometimes happens where somebody comes in to speak for 45 minutes and they say, I'm going to come in, I'll talk about for 20 minutes, and then there'll be Q&A and there's 2 questions, and then you're looking at the clock saying, what do I do for the rest of it? Okay, couple of tips from experience here. Number 1 is ask them a question. So can I just get a show of hands here? How many of you are concerned about how many jobs these days are being subject to automation? Or right, so that's a very specific question, and a show of hands there can give me, it's like doing a live poll really, and then I can elaborate on a point like that. Another thing that you can do is ask everybody a question. So something like, what really excites you about the economy at the moment, or what excites you about the job market, what excites you about your future, and asking each person for their answer to that. And then, of course, the other thing that you can always do is elaborate on a point that you didn't have an awful lot of time to work on before. And just a subset of that answer, Eva, is tell a story. So if it is the case that I've been talking about those 3 topics, and I might say, well, let me tell you a story now about how AI just went wrong, right? So I had this conversation with a bot, and it came back with insufficient information, and I kept going and I kept going, and I said, oh my God, I would have been so much easier if I had gone down a different way. So by telling a story, that also can, and it's not just about filling the space, but filling the space valuably. So what I would say is here, in fairness, I'm speaking from the voice of experience of where I have been caught by the clock in both directions. They certainly have worked for me.
So if a guest speaker have a lot of time left at the end of a presentation, they can either opt to ask the audience a question, or they can elaborate on a point that they didn't have time before, or they can even tell a story. Thank you, Susan. I'm sure that our guest speakers will find these tips very helpful.